In August of 1918, the Lake Erie and Western Railroad's newest 282 Light Mikado, number 5541, steamed out of the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The second of 15 such locomotives purchased by the L&W, she was built to USRA specifications and assigned for freight and passenger service. In 1922, the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, often known as the Nickel Plate Road, purchased the Lake Erie and Western, and 5541 was renumbered to 587, after which she began operating out of Frankfort, Indiana for the Nickel Plate. In 1952, number 587 was the lucky locomotive chosen to pull Richard Nixon's campaign train for vice presidency. She served the Nickel Plate for 37 years, last running for the railroad in 1953, and was stored serviceable until her official retirement in 1955. Now, it is important to point out that number 587 cylinders were replaced with Lima Locomotive Works castings during a 1943 overhaul. In addition, number 587's tender was swapped with a larger tender from another nickel plate Mikado, number 639, because the stoker on 639's tender was inoperable, and 587's tender was in good shape. Coincidentally, the 639 still exists today, on display in Bloomington, Illinois. Getting back on track, number 587 was put on display in Broad Ripple Park in Indianapolis in 1955. She sat there for 28 years as a monument to the railroad that helped build the city. But in 1983, things would begin to look up for the 587. The city of Indianapolis wanted to build a public library in Broad Ripple, but the only available location was where the 587 was displayed. A group of people known as Friends of 587 did a feasibility study on the locomotive and determined that it was a good project for restoration, so it was trucked out of the park that same year.
It took about 2.5 hours to get the engine loaded and chained down. Then it was time to move it. But the job was too difficult for one truck to handle and the drive shaft broke. After moving the broken truck out of the way and bringing in a crane to help tow the trailer, the move was successful. It took about a half an hour to bring the train from its Broad Ripple resting place to the point of departure for its new journey. But getting the train to this point doesn't end the project. There is still the problem of getting the train off the trailer and onto the track. And it will be towed on Thursday to the Beech Grove Amtrak yard to be refurbished. The cost of moving the train? About $42,000. That's a lot of steam. David Barris, Channel 8 News on the Scene, Broad Ripple.
For the next 5 years, the Friends of 587 labored to rebuild this nickel plate survivor. On the morning of August 29, 1988, with the boiler filled with compressed air, nickel plate 587 moved under her own power for the first time in 34 years.
Shortly before 8 a.m., Chief Mechanical Officer Cliff Hadlock and Boilermaker Richard Decalon have the honor of lighting the first fire.
At last, the 5 years spent to restore old number 587 had paid off.
Following 4 years and thousands of man-hours of refitting, rebuilding, the steam engine Old Nickel Plate 587 rolled out of the Beech Grove Amtrak yards by its own power. This is the first time the old steam engine has operated since 1953. A group of 30 volunteers spent 12,000 hours, $110,000 donated money, rebuilding that 70-year-old locomotive. Today, Old 587 chugged its way into the Indiana Railroad yards. And on Saturday, the engine will be on display for Hoosier Celebration 88 at the State House. And on September 17th and 18th, that engine will lead 2 excursions from Indianapolis to Logansport. And whether you're a train buff or not, seeing that thing coming down the pike, it's majestic.
For the next 15 years, the 587 was operated by the Indiana Transportation Museum and was considered its crown jewel. Almost instantly, she started making history. In 1989, she led a rare triple header with Norfolk and Western locomotives numbers 611 and 1218 as part of that year's National Railway Historical Society convention. In 1993, she led a doubleheader with Nickel Plate Road 284 number 765, which was the first time two nickel plate locomotives had double-headed since the steam era. Norfolk Southern ended their steam program in late 1994, but the 587 was one of just a few participants not to be affected. The 587 was primarily used to pull the Indiana Transportation Museum's fair train from Fishers, Indiana to the State Fair in Indianapolis. In the year 2000, number 587 was the star of the children's movie Old 587, The Great Train Robbery. In the film, a group of children find the 587 in a scrapyard, and with the help of her old engineer, save her from scrap and donate her to a museum. Unfortunately, the 587's happy days weren't to last much longer.
Well, this is, I guess you'd call it the last official run of the 587. We're fixing to go into its 15-year rebuild come January. And so we just kind of have come out with the Steam Heritage Day today to run the full length of the line and get as many people out as we can to, say goodbye to her for a while.
In January of 2003, number 587 entered into her federally mandated inspection in Hopewell. Work progressed slowly until 2016, when it came to a screeching halt. The Indiana Transportation Museum was about to battle the city it had long called home. It all started when the ITM's line south of their location in Noblesville was ripped up and made into a trail, and the line north of Noblesville was closed off because of track issues, leaving the ITM landlocked for rail transport. In addition, it was revealed that the ITM was not being properly managed, financial records were not being kept properly, and the museum was in serious debt. This culminated in a legal battle with the city of Noblesville, which was eventually lost. On June 8, 2018, the court ordered ITM to move their equipment out of their location before July 12th, and anything that would be left would be raided by the police and cut up for scrap. Because the museum was landlocked via rail, everything that was moved had to be moved by truck. As 587 was in the midst of her rebuild, the ITM was unsure how or if she'd be moved. For the first time since 1953, the 587's future would become uncertain. Fortunately, the story of 587 doesn't end there. Soon after the court order, a group known as the Kentucky Steam Heritage Corporation made a deal with ITM to move number 587 to their future home in Ravenna, Kentucky, as well as acquiring the 587's tool car and auxiliary water tender for future use behind their locomotive, Chesapeake and Ohio Kanawha number 2716. Number 587's rebuild will be completed in Ravenna, and it will be stored there until ITM has the funds to run it themselves once again. There is no doubt that number 587 has made some great memories for all who have seen her, and hopefully she will be making many more memories and much more steam